I would like to thank Pacifica Institute for organizing this panel, and I'm a political scientist, therefore I would like to talk about some cause-effect relations. So a follower of world politics would be astonished by the frequency of terrorist activities, civil wars, and interstate wars in Muslim majority societies, especially for the last 15 years. But we can narrow down the question by focusing on two parameters. First, on other types of violence, Muslims are doing much better. For example, according to a recent survey, in homicide rates, murder rates in Muslim majority countries is 2.5 per year per 100,000 people, whereas the world average is 7.5. So they are killing much less. The homicide is much less for non-political. If we look at political violence in the 20th century, it wasn't Muslims killing. It was mostly Europeans in the First World War and Second World War. And it wasn't the so-called Islamist terrorists, but it was Marxist-Leninist terrorists throughout the 20th century, even in the Middle East. So what has happened for the last 15 years, okay? Why now we are hearing more Muslim activism on political violence recently? So first of all, I agree with Imam Taha that it is not the essence or textual basis of Islam that trigger violence politically. Everybody knows now chapter 5, article 32 in the Quran saying if anyone killed a person, it would be as if he killed the entire humanity, and if anyone saved a life, it would be as if he saved the life of the entire humanity. But I would like to emphasize another verse, which is much less known, on chapter 4 and number 93. So now we know that Islamist terrorists mostly kill Muslims, and dictators from Syria to elsewhere killing Muslims. So that has nothing to do with the book. Why? Because the book says anyone who kills a believer deliberately will receive as his reward to live in hell forever. A Muslim for hell forever, which is very good to emphasize, very strong. But it keeps going. God will be angry with him. And then say God will curse him. I think that's enough. So, and prepare a dreadful torment for him. So, despite this verse, if a Muslim killed Muslim, a terrorist or dictator, whatever, it has nothing to do with the text. Text is very obvious and clear, right? And religions are multivocal. They are open to interpretation. Any religion can be interpreted in a peaceful way or radical way. But of course, there are radical interpretations of Islam, okay? So it's a long debate, but very briefly, many scholars now touch upon Salafi jihadism. For European jihadists or for Middle East jihadists, there is the so-called Salafism, which is radical, literal understanding of Islam, and with it combined jihadism, Salafi jihadism, is the root cause of political violence in many places. So how comes, and then you can blame Muslims, why this particular version of Islam is influential, at least for some young people. Because Salafism is controlling Mecca, Medina, and 20% of world's oil reserves. So I don't blame and single out Saudi Arabia, but there is the root cause of Salafism historically. Then you can say, why did Muslims let these Wahhabis, Salafis, control Mecca, Medina? So it wasn't Muslims, actually. It was Britain who let them control Mecca, Medina. I am not blaming singleton Britain either, but you know, it's good to discuss. Why? Because for 4 centuries, it was the Ottomans, mainstream moderate Muslims, controlling Mecca, Medina. But Britain was not happy with the idea of Ottoman Caliphate, because Ottomans were intervening in the Indian colonization of, Britain colonization of India. And therefore, they want to abolish the Caliphate. They support Sharif Hussein during the First World War to defeat Ottomans, and they succeed. So Ottomans were defeated, Caliphate abolished, that's it, in the First World War. Then Sharif Hussein, the ally of Britain, wanted to be the caliph. He declared his caliphate. He was a mainstream Muslim Sunni. And Britain didn't want to see any caliph. Therefore, they supported Salafi Wahhabis to defeat Sharif Hussein. They did, and then Saudi Arabia was funded with the British help. So therefore, if you think that the Western countries always support moderate Islam versus radical Islam, you are wrong. So that's one thing. The second thing I want to emphasize is that violence is a very complicated issue. Okay, scholars of violence, if there's one thing they agree on, is that it's multi-causal. It has political, economic, social, psychological reasons behind. And mostly it creates a vicious circle. If a country is economically underdeveloped, it's likely to be ignorant and schooling and literacy rate decline. Then after the mass ignorance and illiteracy, political chaos is followed. Then political chaos definitely brings violence, and it's a vicious circle. And when I'm teaching it in my classroom, I'm giving the example to my students. A student, imagine that she get an F, get really depressed, and keep sleeping, watching TV, and eating next to the refrigerator, gaining weight. Then her friends think that she's a loser. Then everybody stop talking to her. She get more depressed, get an F again, and eat more, and watch TV and sleep. So in the Middle East, unfortunately, so it's a tragic situation. I don't want to make fun of it, but it's like that student. So there are too many problems creating a vicious circle. And therefore, violence is a cause and effect of this vicious circle, which includes several political, socio-economic problems, very deep problems. So therefore, religion is a small issue in this major socio-political crisis. So the last point I want to emphasize is the issue of ISIS in Syria and Iraq. Okay? So if you follow the first and second point, now it makes sense the third one. Why? Because Salafi jihadism bringing European and Libyan and North African jihadists to these two countries, and these two countries have been in a major crisis. So to 2003 American invasion of Iraq abolished the army, abolished the Ba'ath Party, which meant the collapse of the state. And then the recent civil war in Syria meant also collapse of the state. And anyone who read Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan or any philosophical book about the importance of the state knows that chaos brings violence. If there is no law enforcement, if there is no strong state, people become wolves of each other. You cannot trust your neighbor. Under these circumstances, citizenship is no longer an identity. People try to tie with sectarian and ethnic identities. And if you look at these two states, Syria and Iraq, Sunnis in both are marginalized and persecuted by the state authority. After the US invasion of Iraq, Iraq turned into a pro-Iranian and Shia-dominated country. So Prime Minister Maliki really marginalized Sunnis. We can elaborate on more in the Q&A if you want. And then in Syria, before the civil war, Sunnis were marginalized, though they were a majority. In the civil war, many of them were killed. And then ISIS somehow emerged as a strong fighting Sunni force. Therefore, Sunnis who had no choice regarded ISIS lesser than two evils, which was wrong, but that's the case. So therefore, the collapse of state in Syria, Iraq, is the primary reason for the rise of ISIS and the Sunni support of this crazy radical terrorist group. What is the lesson for the future? I think if you follow the three items, first of all, yes, Islam is a peaceful religion, but there should be more preaching, more emphasis on moderate understanding of Islam rather than Salafi jihadism. Second, Western countries, or the world in general, should contribute to the political, socio-economic problems of the Middle East to break the vicious circle and to create a virtuous circle. And last but not least, for the Syrian and Iraqi case, especially on the issue of ISIS, so killing ISIS members will not solve the problem in the long run. There should be an equal opportunity for Sunnis in both countries, and there should be a political solution based on citizenship, and the Shia and Alawite oppression over the Sunni populations in both countries should be at least limited in order to solve the problem of ISIS. Thanks for your attention.